Um, why do we do what we do? And I don't mean the basic stuff.
Right, like breathing or sleeping.
Yeah, exactly. Why we eat or seek shelter when it rains. That's just biology, right? That's just keeping the machine running. I'm talking about the specifically human stuff.
The big
Right.
questions.
Why do we build skyscrapers that literally scrape the clouds? Why do we write symphonies that make people weep? Or why do we, and I mean really obsess over adding another zero to the bank account?
Or fighting a war over a tiny patch of dirt.
Yes. Or even just making sure your lawn is, slightly greener than the guy's next door.
It is the ultimate question, isn't it? Usually if you ask someone that why they're chasing that promotion or why they are writing that novel, you get the standard surface answers.
Right. Like ambition, greed, maybe creativity.
Or a desire for power
Uh,
or legacy.
Sure, but today we're doing a deep dive into a source that suggests those answers are basically just distractions.
Highly elaborate distraction.
Right. Exactly. We are unpacking Ernest Becker's Pulitzer Prize-winning masterpiece, The Denial of Death. And honestly, I picked this up thinking it was going to be some standard psychology read, but it absolutely floored me.
It's not exactly a light beach read.
No, not at all. It is heavy, it is terrifying, but it also might just be one of the most liberating things you will ever hear.
It really demands everything from the reader. Becker called it a magnificent psychophilosophical synthesis.
Which sounds like a massive mouthful.
It does, but he wasn't just trying to write a dry psychology textbook. He was trying to merge psychology, religion, anthropology, and philosophy into one single unified theory of human existence. He wanted the ultimate why behind literally everything.
A theory of everything for human behavior. And the thesis, the core idea he just circles around for hundreds of pages, is shocking because of how incredibly simple it is.
It really is.
He argues that the mainspring of human activity is the fear of death. That everything we call culture, our religions, our nations, our careers, is essentially a defense mechanism. It's an elaborate lie we tell ourselves to feel immortal.
It's a deeply confronting idea. Becker is essentially ripping away the curtain of civilization here. He wants to show us that underneath the suits and the cities and the polite dinner parties, we are just trembling animals.
Terrified animals.
Right. We are acutely aware of our own extinction,
Yeah.
and we are desperate, just absolutely desperate to prove that we are more than just biology that rots.
So if he's right, it changes how we look at literally everything in our lives, from sibling rivalry to global politics. But let's break this down because fear of death sounds a bit abstract. Where does Becker even start this massive argument?
Well, we have to start with the concept of heroism, but you have to completely wipe away the Marvel movie version of heroism from your mind.
Right, we aren't talking about saving the world from aliens or wearing a cape.
No, not at all. Becker argues that heroism is the central calling of all human life. It isn't just for soldiers or mythological figures, it's a reflex.
A reflex to what?
To the terror of death. Since the beginning of time, humans have elevated the person who can face death, or the person who seems to somehow transcend the natural world.
So society is basically just a stage for us to act out this heroism.
Exactly. He calls society a codified hero system.
The codified hero system.
That is a crucial term. Whether you are in a so-called primitive magical culture or a modern civilized city, the society provides the script. It tells you, hey, if you do X, Y, and Z, you are a person of value. You matter. You are not just a dying animal.
I think that's a really crucial distinction he makes between high and low heroism, because usually when we think of heroes, we think of the high version.
Churchill, Mao, Napoleon.
Right, people who literally shape history.
Those are the people who try to carve their names into the bedrock of history itself. But Becker points out that the low heroism is just as potent. It's the heroism of the everyday.
The coal miner.
The coal miner, the peasant, the person simply trying to feed their family. They are earning their feeling of cosmic specialness just by doing their duty.
Cosmic specialness. That phrase really stuck with me. There's a line in the source material where he says, we disguise our struggle by piling up figures in a bank book.
Yes, that's a great example.
That hits so close to home. Because we think we're just being responsible savers or savvy investors.
Right.
But Becker says, no, you are trying to build a fortress against death.
Right?
If I have enough money or a slightly better home than my neighbor, I have value. I count.
It's the urge to stand out, to avoid being just another grain of sand that gets washed away. And this actually helps explain the crisis of modern youth that Becker discusses.
Oh, this part was fascinating.
He observes that when young people rebel or drop out of society, they aren't just being difficult or lazy.
They're rejecting the script, right?
Precisely. They are sensing that the cultural hero system, the corporate career, the rampant consumerism, the classic American dream is no longer empirically true.
It doesn't work for them anymore.
It doesn't. They look at the gold watch after 40 years at a desk and think, that's it. That's the immortality project.
They don't buy the lie. Work hard, buy a Toyota, retire, die.
Right.
It just doesn't give them that feeling of eternal meaning that we all crave.
It rings totally hollow. And without a functioning hero system, you are left naked before the anxiety of death. That leads to rebellion or mental illness or total withdrawal from society. You just cannot function without a hero system.
Now, this need to count, to be special, brings us to another huge concept in the book: narcissism.
Yes.
Usually if I call you a narcissist, I'm insulting you. I'm saying you're vain or self-obsessed. But Becker flips that entirely on its head.
He reframes narcissism completely. For
Yeah.
Becker, it isn't a character flaw, it's a biological necessity. He actually quotes Aristotle, who said, luck is when the guy next to you gets hit with the arrow.
Which is incredibly dark, but logically makes sense.
It's the pure evolutionary logic of survival. An organism has to believe on some level that it is the center of the universe. It has to value its own life above others, or it simply wouldn't survive to reproduce. We are prepared, as Becker says, to recreate the world out of ourselves.
And this shows up so clearly in children. The source material goes into this detail about sibling rivalry that is honestly hilarious, but also deeply tragic.
Oh, the juice cup.
Yes, it's not just about who got more juice.
No, and parents listening will recognize this immediately. The child screaming because their sibling got a bigger piece of paper to light in the fireplace. They don't actually care about the paper. The paper is totally irrelevant.
So what are they actually screaming about?
They are screaming, I must count. I must be the object of primary value because if I am second best, I am vulnerable. I might be discarded.
Wow, it's literally a battle for existence fought with juice cups and scrap paper.
It really is. The child is basically saying, I need to know that I am the sun this family orbits around because if I'm not, I might not survive. And this leads to what Becker calls the tragic paradox of the human condition.
This was the part where I had to put the book down and just stare at the wall for a minute.
It is the absolute crux of the argument. Humans are dualistic. On one hand, we have these minds that can soar. We can contemplate the infinite. We can imagine eternity. We can solve complex mathematics. We can write poetry about the stars. We feel like gods. We have this symbolic self-identity that feels expansive and immortal.
And it's a massive but.
On the other hand, we are housed in a body that gets sick, a body that ages, a body that has to go to the bathroom, and a body that eventually dies and decays. We are, to use the source's imagery, gods with anuses.
That is honestly the most memorable phrase in the whole text. Gods with anuses.
It's hard to forget.
It sums it up perfectly. We have these godlike minds trapped in these dying animals, and that tension creates the terror.
And that brings us to the worm at the core.
Right. This is where the debate gets really heated in the field of psychology. The text mentions there are basically two schools of thought regarding the fear of death. First, there's the healthy-minded school.
Right. The healthy-minded school argues that the fear of death isn't natural. They say it's learned or it's a neurosis. They argue that if you are raised with enough love and security, you just accept death as a natural part of life. It's just the closing of a chapter, nothing to be afraid of if you're a well-adjusted person.
Which sounds lovely. I'd love to believe that. But Becker says absolutely not.
He vehemently disagrees. He sides with the morbidly minded school. These are thinkers like William James, Freud, and Gregory Zilborg. They argue the fear is innate. It's built in. It is the factory setting of the human machine.
William James used that visceral image, the skull grinning at the banquet.
Exactly.
You can be having the best time, eating the best food, surrounded by your best friends, but the skull is always there in the background.
Becker leans heavily on an essay by Gregory Zilborg here. Zilborg argues that the instinct for self-preservation is the exact same thing as the fear of death. You can't have one without the other.
Because they're two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. If you love life, you must be terrified of losing it. You cannot be a biological organism that wants to live and not fear the end of that life.
But here's the thing, and I think you, listening to this right now, might be thinking this too. I don't walk around terrified of death every single minute of my day. I'm worried about my emails or what to make for dinner or if I left the stove on. If this fear is so universal and so massive, Where is it? Why aren't we all just screaming constantly?
That is the brilliance of Zilberg's insight. He says if we were constantly conscious of our own mortality, we literally couldn't function. We would be paralyzed by terror. We wouldn't be able to get out of bed. So we must repress it.
So repression isn't just a glitch in the brain. It's a requirement.
It is a fundamental survival mechanism. And Becker points out that repression isn't just forgetting something, like where you put your car keys. It is a constant, active psychological effort. It is keeping the lid on the boiling pot.
We're actively holding it down.
Yes, we live as if we are immortal, not because we are, but because we have built a massive psychological wall to block out the terror.
And when that wall is at its thinnest, that's when we look at childhood. The source material makes the case that children are actually much more prone to this terror than adults because they haven't fully built their armor yet.
Exactly. The child has a very weak ego. They live in a world that is confusing and magical. They don't fully understand cause and effect yet. Becker talks about the Talion principle, this idea of magical retaliation.
Can you unpack that a bit, the Talion principle?
Sure, it's the idea that events are connected in a magical way. The child sees the cat eat a mouse and the mouse just vanishes. To the child, that means they could vanish too. Or if they get angry at their mother and then their mother gets sick the next day, they think their anger caused the sickness. They live in a terrifying world of cause and effect confusion.
That sounds utterly exhausting.
It is. The child creates what Becker calls a complex symbol of death. It's not just dying in the clinical medical sense. It's the fear of loss, the fear of the dark, the fear of their own destructive anger coming back at them.
And the text specifically links this to nightmares.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Nightmares are that complex symbol breaking through. The repression hasn't solidified yet in a child, so the terror leaks out when their guard is down during sleep.
There's a fascinating example in the notes about how fragile this repression is, even much later in life for adults. It mentions a study done after an earthquake in Southern California.
Yes, this was a really revealing study. After the earth tremors, there was a sudden, massive spike in anxiety neuroses in children. The harmless noises of the earth, like rumbling trucks or distant construction, suddenly signaled that the ground itself wasn't safe.
The repression failed.
Exactly. The reality of nature, that it can crush us at any moment without warning, broke right through the psychological shield.
And there's also the example of the passengers on the plane. The engine backfires, it's just a loud noise, not even a crash, and people panicked and literally jumped from the wing of the plane while it was on the tarmac.
It shows that the worm at the core is sleeping very lightly. It doesn't take much to wake it up at all. The sudden noise triggered the deep, rumbling terror that is always just beneath the surface. We are always just one loud bang away from realizing exactly how fragile we are.
I want to go back to the gods with anuses idea because Becker dedicates a whole section to anality and the body as a problem. And we should probably warn everyone listening, this isn't just a weird Freudian obsession with potty training, right?
No, though Freud is obviously the grandfather of this line of thinking, Becker takes it much deeper philosophically. He argues that the child's discovery of their own waste is a deeply traumatic moment.
Because it proves they're physical.
Yes. It is the first undeniable evidence that they are a biological machine. They intake fuel, and they produce waste. They are fundamentally tethered to the physical world.
There's a quote from a Jonathan Swift poem in the text that is just, well, it's very blunt.
Nor wonder how I lost my wits. Oh, Celia shits.
It makes you laugh because it's so vulgar, but in the context of the book, it's actually really profound and a bit sad.
It represents the complete shattering of the romantic illusion. The poet is in love with Celia. He sees her as a goddess, a higher being, pure light and perfection. And then he's violently confronted with her biology. It reminds him that she and he are animals, and animals die.
So culture, in Becker's view, is just a massive attempt to deny this creatureliness.
Right.
We try to pretend we are angels so we don't have to admit we are animals.
Precisely. Think about it. We bathe, we use perfume, we hide our waste in porcelain bowls behind locked doors. We create elaborate dining rituals with forks and knives and napkins.
All to pretend we aren't just eating to survive.
Right. All of this is to distance ourselves from the fact that we are organisms. We are desperately trying to prove we are not just food for worms. We are trying to be Celia the goddess, not Celia the organism.
This leads us to the synthesis part of the book, which I found to be the most fascinating part of the deep dive. Becker brings in a guy named Otto Rank. Now, I hadn't heard much about Rank before reading this.
Rank is really the unsung hero of this entire text. He was one of Freud's inner circle, a real boy wonder, but he eventually broke away. Becker thinks rank was incredibly unfairly dismissed by the psychological community because rank saw that psychology and religion were actually trying to do the exact same thing,
Which is what?
provide an immortality formula. Rank argued that all societies are inherently religious.
Even the atheistic ones.
Yes. And this is a huge takeaway.
Yeah.
Even the Soviet Union, which was officially and strictly atheistic, or our modern scientific consumer culture, they all offer a way for man to count for more than just a dying animal. They offer a myth significance.
So if I believe in the state, or in science with a capital S, or in the free market, I am essentially practicing a religion that promises me my legacy will outlast my death.
Correct. If you contribute to the state remembers you. If you advance science, your discovery lives on forever in the textbooks. It's all an immortality project. But here is the modern dilemma, and it is where Becker gets very prophetic. He says we are currently choking on truth.
Choking on truth. That is such a powerful image. What does he mean by that?
He means we have too much knowledge. We have dissected the atom, we have analyzed the psyche, we have mapped the entire globe. But in doing so, we have stripped away the illusions that historically gave us courage.
We peeked behind the curtain too many times.
Exactly. We have debunked the myths, we killed the gods, we questioned the state, we realized money is literally just paper, but we haven't replaced them with anything that satisfies that deep throbbing need for cosmic heroism.
We have facts, but we don't have meaning.
That's it perfectly. We have no throbbing, vital center, to use his exact phrase. We are completely transparent to ourselves, and that transparency is terrifying. We know we are just acting a part, and that makes it really hard to believe in the play. We know the hero system is arbitrary, so it doesn't protect us from the fear of death nearly as well as it used to.
So let's try to pull this all together. What does this all mean for you listening to this right now? We are these dualistic creatures, gods, with bodies that decay. We are fundamentally terrified of death, so we build these elaborate hero systems, our careers, our nations, our legacies, just to repress that fear and feel immortal.
And the tragedy, and Becker uses the word tragedy very intentionally here, is that this drive for heroism is actually what causes so much human misery.
How so? Why does my need to be a hero hurt you?
Because if my hero system differs from yours, it threatens me. If you worship a different god or believe in a different political system or even just live your life in a way that contradicts mine, you are implicitly telling me that my immortality project is wrong, that my specific defense against death is invalid.
And if my defense is invalid, then I'm just a dying animal again. The terror comes back.
Exactly. The shield drops, the worm at the core wakes up, so I feel like I have to destroy you to prove that I am right. We kill each other to prove that we are immortal.
Wow.
It makes human conflict tragic rather than just pure evil. We are fighting to maintain the vital lie that literally keeps us sane.
That is, man, that is heavy.
Yeah.
It really shifts your perspective when you watch the news. You're not watching policy debates or territorial disputes. You're watching colliding immortality projects.
It encourages a kind of deep empathy, honestly. Even for people you violently disagree with, you realize they are just as terrified of the void as you are. They are just clinging to a different shield.
So here's the provocative thought I want to leave everyone with. Becker calls our character and our culture a vital lie. It's a shield against the terror of death. But what would happen if we actually dropped the shield?
That is the ultimate question.
Right. What if we didn't replace the myth with a new one? What if we just stood there, fully aware of our decay, fully accepting that we won't outlast our physical bodies? Could we build a society on that truth, or would the anxiety just rip us apart?
Is it possible to live with the worm at the core in full view? Can we look directly at the sun without going blind?
Becker seems to suggest it might destroy us. Or maybe it's the only way to be truly free. To admit we are temporary, fragile, biological creatures and find a way to live with that without needing to crush anyone else to prove we matter.
It is arguably the hardest task a human can undertake. To be completely disillusioned and yet still live with courage. To know you are a god with an anus and find the humor and the profound humanity in that.
A challenge for the rest of the week, and maybe the rest of our lives. Go easy on your own hero systems today, and maybe go easy on your neighbors too. You're both just trying to keep the terror at bay. Thanks for diving deep with us into the dark, fascinating world of Ernest Becker.
It's been a truly fascinating journey.
See you next time.